welcome back. We're here on our next episode discussing the origins of Islam from the perspective of Gnosticism, and we're talking about the book of Elchasai. Today, we'll actually start digging into the whole history and the story of what the book of Elchasai is and how these things link to Islam, to the Islamic narrative. So I've got with me Emmanuel, I've got Usama, Dakdok, and I've got JC, people you guys all know. And for those who know me, obviously, you know who I am. For those who don't, it's Lloyd de Jong, because people struggle with my surname. So guys, welcome. Any thoughts on what we covered the last time on this topic? Any thoughts or feedback on the topic? And has it changed your thinking in any way or added anything to the Islamic narrative?
I think I'm very close to say the Shahada. I mean, another couple of broadcasts. And look, he already got the hat. He already bought the hat. Brother Emmanuel got the hat. And give me a hat, honey. Buy me a hat. Okay, she said she will buy me a hat. All right. Thank you.
One euro on eBay, including shipping from China. So I couldn't say that.
Oh, boy.
Buy it from China, babe. It's $1. Okay, go ahead.
Well, there you go. Yeah, JC, any thoughts from you?
Yeah, it's starting to make more and more sense. We think one of the most important things that we learned last week is that the narrative keeps on changing. Like the Islam was perceived very differently 100 years ago and 200 years ago. So now we're just dealing with the last iteration of the whole problem.
Yeah, no, the narrative does seem to have changed many, many times. And today, in the 21st century, which century are we in? Anyway, Islam is not in the 20th century, so that's why I was thinking backwards. But yeah, they have a slightly different narrative now to what they did 50 years ago, 100 years ago, 200 years ago. Because these authors are talking about a different Islam than we have today.
Yeah, and if you think about it, Brother Lloyd, I don't think there was any narrative in the first 200 years of Islam. So I don't know. It was like a mystery spreading. And then we got to hear some stories right and left. And now we're hearing a continuing of changing of narrative. Yes, indeed. It's a cult. How do we know a cult? A cult is it is a story which keep changing because there's no foundation. There's no solid belief to start with. And that is the nature of a cult. Yeah.
That's the nature. I just want to add, that's the nature of a lie. The truth never changes, while a lie has to be constantly retold.
Sure.
Fair enough. And yeah, pity that Odon is not here, and also Paul somehow had a technical issue and dropped off. But okay, so we'll pick up from where we ended last week. This is from the life of Muhammad, the Sirat Rasulullah. And from that very night, every one of them was able to speak the language of the people to whom he was sent. Oddly enough, it's interesting that they speak here of speaking in tongues, but they actually, and I believe correctly, stated as being able to speak the language of the people to whom they will go as messengers, rather than just randomly babbling on the floor, which I've seen, which was bizarre, to say the least. Now, those whom Jesus, son of Mary, sent, both disciples and those who came after them in the land, were Peter, the disciple, and Paul with him. And Paul belonged to the followers, and he was not a disciple. So he was not an immediate apostle. He was a follower, a disciple who came after, which, oddly enough, the Sirat Rasulullah is fairly accurate. He goes to Rome, and Andrew and Matthew went to the land of the cannibals. So is that Canada? Thomas went to the land of Babel, which is in the land of the east. Philip to Carthage, which is Africa. John to Ephesus, the city of the young men of the cave. James to Jerusalem, which is Aelia, the city of the sanctuary cities. He went to Minneapolis. And Bartholomew went to Arabia, which is the land of the Hejaz. So now they're saying that, yes, Christianity came to Arabia, oddly enough. Simon went to the land of the Berbers, and Judah, who was not one of the disciples, was put in the place of Judas. Okay, fair enough, but Peter the disciple and Paul with him, right? So we'll talk more about that, but that's, I can report from the land of the cannibals, right? Okay, so yeah. Now, the Apostle Paul, now this is from Biblical Archaeology Review, which is fantastic, a really good resource, because these guys update regularly their articles. They do lots of fantastic digs. They compile information, and it's very, very helpful. This is from the Winter 2021 edition, volume 47, number 4, Reconstructing Paul's Hidden Years in the Desert. And I went into Arabia. Later I returned again unto Damascus. That's Galatians 1, verse 17. Behold, are not all these who are speaking Galileans? And how do we hear, each one of us, in our own language? And they speak of Parthians. That's very important. Parthians, we're talking Persia. So you're talking Persians here, Iran. Medes, Elamites, and those residing in Mesopotamia. Okay, fascinating. So that's Babylonia, Judea, Cappadocia, Pontus, Asia, so Cappadocia, Turkey. Pontus, Asia, Phrygia, Pamphylia, Egypt, the parts of Libya towards Cyrene, the Romans who were in town, both Jews and proselytes, Cretans, and, interestingly, Arabs. They were preaching to Arabs even 2,000 years ago. And we hear them speaking in our own languages the great deeds of God. Acts 2.
Yeah. I love this passage, Brother Lloyd. And I believe it emphasizes on the fact which we cannot understand, or because we don't think of it. The miracle of speaking in tongue is not on the speaking, but on the hearing. I believe personally that they were speaking in the one language, as Peter gave the sermon, and the 3,000 people got saved on the day. But the people heard what he said in their own language. So it is not Peter was speaking Coptic, and Peter was speaking Arabic, and Peter was speaking, because that will make his sermon a good 13 languages. He have to repeat that sermon 13 times for people.
That would make logical sense, yeah.
But he was speaking, and people, the miracle is in their ears, that they can hear in their own dialect, in their own language. Not just language.
Notice Allah here doesn't only speak Arabic.
Yeah,
which wasn't even invented then yet. Otherwise, why was Allah not speaking Arabic at the time? Welcome back, Paul. How are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you. Sorry about that. Some technical glitches. The jinn in my computer again.
Allah works in mysterious ways.
MashaAllah.
So welcome back. Any thoughts on what we covered last week? And right now, I'm just talking about the fact that even within the Sirah and in the New Testament, they speak of Parthians, Iranians, they speak of Arabs, and so on, who all received the message. And the apostles that went to all of these places to spread the message. And this will be relevant. But any thoughts from you with regards to our last episode?
Me? No, ready to press on. I mean, I don't really know a great deal about the Elchasites. Here to learn on that.
Okay, great. So... Right, that's so. Why was
I do have a thought about the passage on here. Is this this is from the Acts of the Apostles, isn't it? This is a Pentecost,
correct?
Reading, and I do have a little bit of an insight on this, if you have a moment.
Sure.
And that is up on the Dome of the Rock, or up on the Temple Mount. The Dome of the Rock naturally grabs the attention because it's a very large and a very splendid building. And so getting somewhat less attention is the small building next to it, which is called the Dome of the Chain. But there's something very unusual about the Dome of the Chain, and that is that it has 11 pillars. And that's very strange. Normally, one thinks in terms of 12. 12 is like the magic number. You got a picture of it up there? Yeah. So if you look at the scene, it's easy to sort of overlook the Dome of the Chain and just be interested in this big neighbor, just a few, which it's literally in the shadow of. But it's very unusual that a building should have 11 pillars like that, and you wonder what the significance is. And there is precedent for churches in the Middle East. There's particularly one church, a basilica, I think it was in Damascus, built before this, in which it had some sort of teaching platform that was raised on 11 pillars, and that was described as representing the 11 true apostles. So by the time you leave out Judas Iscariot, There were 11 true apostles that need to be commemorated. And I think that's what the Dome of the Chain represents. I think it represents the preaching of the apostles. I can't think of where the number 11 features.
Well, and even in the Sirah, here they speak of the apostles speaking in tongues, not babbling, but actually speaking in the language of the people to whom they were sent. And they speak of Peter as a disciple and Paul, of course, but now they hate Paul. But here they speak respectfully of Paul, and they speak of Bartholomew who went to Arabia, the land of the Hejaz, and so on. And then Judah, who was not one of the disciples, was put in the place of Judas. So there's some validity to what you're saying. That's very interesting.
And then you have once you've got into the idea that it's actually, I wouldn't quite call it a Christian monument. I wouldn't go so far. I'm not sure the theology recognizes the divinity of Jesus, so you couldn't call it Christian, but it's a Jesus orientated. Whoever built the Dome of the Rock was interested in the New Testament narrative.
That would make sense.
And then the Dome of the Rock, with its 4 doorways pointing to the north, south, east, and west, could easily be seen as a summons to all the people of the world, a symbolic summons, or it can all go, a symbolic summons to all the people of the world to come to Jerusalem, to come to the site of the temple, which links, I think, quite well with the Pentecost story, with the preaching of the apostles.
But also one wonders why here, even in the Sirah, they actually speak respectfully of Peter and Paul, and Allah doesn't speak Arabic. You know, it's just odd. Yeah. Okay. So, any comments from anyone before I move on? Right. So
not so much on this, no.
Right. Now, the book of Elchasai. So we've spoken a lot about this. I'm still building up to this, but it's a non-canonical book that is now lost. It was actually spoken of by Hippolytus in the Refutation of All Heresies in 2 sections, right? In section 9, from verses 13 to 17 and 10:29. So it was actually well known in the day. Epiphanius in his Panarion, right? Also by Origen, and you can see Eusebius, Ecclesiastical History, who contend that it was used by the followers of Elchasai, a heretical group known as the Elchasites. It was never widely authoritative in the early church period, so obviously it's not canonical. Patristic sources, that's early church fathers, identify the Elchasites as one of 3 groups. Now, this is where I'm really sad that Odon is not here, because now suddenly we're touching on the topic that's close to Odon. But it's 3 groups of Jews, which includes Ebionites and Nazarenes, who combined aspects of Jewish practice with Christian beliefs. They originated at the start of the 2nd century AD, and they appeared to practice a rigid asceticism while emphasizing theosophical speculation. The Book of Elchasai reportedly acknowledged a second baptism, which somehow seems to become, it evolves and morphs into ablution over time. And that effected forgiveness for adultery and healed certain diseases and wounds like bites from mad dogs. So they view dogs as bad. Anyone know of any religion that views dogs as risky?
Islam, my friend.
I think that's the only original thing in Islam, right?
Yeah.
So, oddly enough, the text claimed that Jesus himself revealed the text words to the prophet Elchasai, and the work shows signs of being composed in Aramaic and then being translated into Greek. Right? And according to a scholar called Pritz, this has to do with Nazarene Jewish Christianity. And this is Odon's territory, and now Odon is not here. I have no idea why. Any thoughts, guys? Any Paul from you? Anything on this? I mean, it's
just on the dogs. I mean, I think that came. It ended into Islam later. I mean, it comes from somewhere. I don't know who doesn't like dogs originally, but the Quran only has it has 2 references to dogs in, and the only actual dog to appear in the Quran is a very positive one. That's in the Sleepers of the Cave, where a dog is basically acts as an angel almost, protecting the sleepers while they sleep. So whoever wrote the Quran, doesn't seem to have this antipathy to dogs. That's something that I imagine that comes from culture at some later stage and just got grafted on there.
Right. Osama, any thoughts?
Yeah, I was gonna share the early said Muslims show Peter with respect, but if you go to the Quran chapter 36 and verse 14, that is concerning Paul was sent as a messenger by God, by Allah, as Muslims claim, and it was actually speaking of him respectfully too. So 36:14 interpretation by Al-Tabari, which I cannot open it in my computer. I was going to share with you.
Yeah, Bulus. They speak of Bulus. Yes, Bulus is Paul.
Bulus. So obviously, I do not see why Muslims today hate Paul when it was okay in the early days of Islam.
I mean, well, look at the Islamic dilemma, right? The Quranic dilemma, because now they say, well, it actually, well, what happened is afterwards it. So,
yeah.
And also, Gnostics in general hate Paul, have always hated Paul, because he was basically the first one to speak out against Gnosticism. But I wanted to point something out. Can you go back to your summary? Okay, so it says they appear to practice rigid asceticism while emphasizing theosophical speculation. It's just fascinating to me that it would mention, well, basically theosophy. I mean, I'm not disagreeing, but it's just, we think of theosophy. Usually, we don't even think of theosophy as being Gnostic. We think of it as being, modern esotericism. So I'm just wondering how that got in there.
It's just that, remember, you have Blavatsky, then she comes up with all of this, her own particular soup, and then it gets given the name theosophy, and now we just recognize those things in the past and we apply the modern label. So there's probably just a little bit of that going on.
Yeah, I agree. There are certainly ideological similarities to the heresies that Madame Blavatsky taught. Yeah.
And it's interesting that the Quran, I think, has some quite old strands in it. So I more or less buy into the standard view that it was composed by, most of it was composed by one person in the 7th century. But where that person, what their influences are, I mean, it's clear to me that it gets a lot of influences from all over the place, and some of those are going to be quite old.
As we go through this, you can start to find some really weird things coming up.
But of course, the word that he uses for Christians in the Quran is Nasara, which is an interesting word. I mean, it's the Hebrew, I think, or would refer to them as Nazarene. Is that right?
Nazarene,
standard. But Nasara is quite an unusual sort of word. I mean, it seems to have connections to the idea of the Nazarite oath, but also possibly to the Nazarenes. Maybe the Nazarenes were also connected to the Nazarite oath. I don't think that it's all about the town of Nazareth. I think there's a strand of meaning there that goes back before then.
I think if you think about Isa in the Quran asking, who will be my helper? Who man yakun ansari? The word ansar is a helper. I believe that is the original for why called Nasara, because it is a statement Allah used in the Quran for those who help Allah. That's why Muslims brag about themselves to be Allah's helpers, Ansar Allah. So Ansar is used in Muhammad days for the people of Medina who supported and aided Muhammad and his people. If the story is accurate, when they migrate from Mecca to Medina. So Ansar Allah, Ansar Isa, Ansar Muhammad, Nasara, I believe that is original, but nothing to do about the city of Nazareth, because it was not in Jesus' days a place to brag about somebody. It's a place to mock somebody or make fun of somebody.
Right. Yeah, let's continue. So, right. Now, in works by the early church fathers, the Elchasites, along with the Ebionites, were regarded as heretics, like in Hippolytus, Epiphanius, Panarion, and Origen. Right, so they're well known, they're well documented, but they're not as well known as the Ebionites, for instance, or other, like Martian, other heretics. Now, apocryphal, the meaning. The original meaning of the word apocryphal is not so much not canonical, but rather hidden or secret, referring to the secret or esoteric character of the composition to which the term is applied. Thus, the opening lines of the Apocryphon of John, right, the secret book of John, state that this book contains the teachings and the sayings of the Savior, that's Jesus, which eventually is you, which he revealed to John as a mystery which is hidden in silence. And these full and definitive teachings of the risen Jesus are only to be passed on secretly to John's fellow believers. And at the end of the text, there's a strict prohibition on divulging this to the uninitiated. Cursed is anyone who will give it away for a present or for food or drink or clothing or any other such thing. Now, Muslims in the Sharia are not allowed to share the Sharia with non-Muslims. And then also, you will often find the similar language in the Quran. It's like those who do something for whatever they do it, that will be their reward. And they will not get reward from Allah. If you do it for money, you get money. If you do it for food, then the meal is your reward. So you start to see little parallels in the language. And a prohibition is also found in the book of the great mysterious Logos in the Codex Brucianus, where Jesus says, these mysteries which I will reveal to you, safeguard them and do not give them away to anybody unless they are worthy of them. Now, you'll find, I've covered this previously, but in the stories around the Apostle Paul within the Islamic narrative, Paul obviously is a bad guy who kills himself to destroy Christianity. He's also, so he's a Jew who kills himself to destroy Christianity, but he's also a Christian who doesn't kill himself, but he goes to the Romans and tries to get them to kill the Jews. But he's also King Saul, the king of the Jews. And he's also Bulus al-Shamshati, who is from the 3rd century. And he also talks to the Nestorians from the 5th century and creates 3 different contradictory religions. Yeah, so anyway, but notice, but a Muslim then saves the teachings of Jesus and waits for Muhammad to come along 600, 700 years later and passes them on because Muhammad is worthy. So understand, just note these little parallels in the story, right? And do not give them away to father or mother, brother or sister, or any other relatives, not for food or drink, nor for the sake of a woman, nor for gold or silver, or for anything at all in the world. But is this language reminiscent of the Quranic style language to anyone?
Almost the same way of talking. I can see similar material like that in the Quran, and I just amazed how Muslims can read all different opinion about everything, and they still believe that those who wrote this contradictory cocktail salad information can be a scholar. I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me. If I read it in any Christian writings, I will literally put the book aside. I'll not waste my time to read another chapter in it. But that's all.
Actually, if I may comment on that, in Islam, that is not a bug; it's a feature. The confusion is part of the whole thing. You can see that clearly in the tafsir of the verse that says, "O Mary, sister of Aaron," for example, what it will say, some people say is because Aaron was a very nice guy, and other people say is because Aaron was an evil man.
Very
so
bad
you will
guy.
have one thing and the opposite. Exactly. So with Paul, you will have traditions that says that Paul was the greatest guy after Muhammad or instead of Muhammad, and others that will say that he was evil. And then depending on the circumstances, they will play one card or another. It's all about the confusion. It's a feature.
Exactly.
Right.
God help.
Now, go on.
Can I say something, Lufa? I just want to add, regarding all this, because here over and over again it talks about secrecy, and that's what Gnosticism is about. It's about supposedly secret knowledge and all this Madame Blavatsky bullcrap as well. It's the secret doctrine of all ages. Oh, I know the truth, the secret truth, and you don't, blah, blah, blah. All that secrecy bull, not so nice stuff. I just want to say, you know, what it says in the actual Bible, what the actual Jesus in the actual Bible says, in Matthew 10, what I tell you in the dark, speak in the daylight. What is whispered in your ear, proclaim from the roofs. So, you know, so it's not about secrecy. You know?
No secrets, exactly. And in the apocryphal epistle of James, the author speaks of a secret text written in Hebrew script, which the recipient of the letter is urged not to divulge to the masses. Okay, great. Now, the book of Elchasai. So now we've got to think of Gabriel in the book of Elchasai. So the Hadith writers largely stem from the East, from Iraq, etc. So the Hadith writers all come from this part of the world up here. You have Arabia, then you've got Persia, and you've got Iraq, Assyria, Armenia, and so on. You've got Cappadocia, Turkey, so you have Syria. I mean, so think this region, not down here in Arabia where you've got Mecca and Medina, but they all come from this part of the world, which is really unexpected.
If it was true, people to give us a saying of Muhammad, this should be all from down there. All of them Arab, all of them related to the early companion of Muhammad, not some other far different language even.
Right, exactly. I see Olette's join the chat. Welcome, Olette. Let me know if you'd like to jump on and join us here. I'll send you the link. Okay, yeah, so all of these guys. Now notice Parthia. Parthia is very important. That's Persia. Now you're looking at Iran, what we call today Iran. That's going to be very important again. Right? Now this is the Sasanian Empire at its greatest extent in 620 under Khosrow II. The Sasanian Empire succeeded the Parthian Empire. And they were the last Persian imperial dynasty before the Muslim conquest in the mid-7th century. So these guys they invaded, but they got weak because of their fights with what we now today call the Byzantines, and eventually the Muslims raided and took over, at least the Arabs invaded and took over all of this land. And we know that they were like sponges and they absorbed all of these ideas. Nothing to do with Zoroastrian. Right. Now, the Hadith writers, as I said, come from that part of the world. Now, what shall I read? He pressed me so tightly that I thought it was death, and he let me go and said, read. And I said, what shall I read? He pressed me again, so I thought it was death, and he let me go and said, read. And I said, what shall I read? He pressed with it the third time. So I thought it was death and said, read. And I said, what shall I read? This is great writing. This is superb writing. I nearly fell asleep, but I stayed awake for you guys because it was, boring the fourth time. And this I said to deliver myself from him, lest he should do the same to me again. And he said, read in the name of thy Lord who created man of blood coagulated, blah, 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 who taught by the pen. So I read it. Okay, so Muhammad, so they don't say recite, they say read. I thought Muhammad can't read, but okay, someone didn't tell the author of the Sirah. Now, none of God's creatures was more hateful to me than an ecstatic poet or a man possessed, because that's what he thought was happening to him. Woe is me, poet or possessed. Never shall the Quraysh say this of me. Right? So he feels he's being possessed. I will go to the top of the mountain and throw myself down, that I may kill myself and gain rest. And then, of course, he goes to the mountain, and when he's midway, he hears a voice from heaven saying, "O Muhammad, you are the apostle of God, of Allah, and I am Gabriel." I raised my heads towards heaven to see who was speaking, and lo, there was Gabriel in the form of a man with his feet astride the horizon. So Muhammad meets Gabriel for the first time, and he sees him rather for the first time. And Gabriel is a giant. His feet cover the entire earth. His feet stand from one horizon to the other end of the horizon. He's very, very huge. He's enormous. Not just a giant, but
now was he whispered to Muhammad, read, or he speak with a loud voice, blow his ears out?
Look, I suspect they were in the Zoolander cave for ants, because any angel that has feet that stand astride the horizon, when you're on top of the mountain, you look at the horizon and you see a foot over there and a foot over there, that's a very big angel. That's miles.
He's talking about millions of miles long. He can actually, according to the measurement given to us by the scholars of Islam, the distance between the earlobe and the shoulders is miles and miles. These angels, millions of miles, I'm sorry. These angels can be standing on the first earth and their head will be out of the seven heavens. Literally crossing the seven earths and the seven heavens.
Yep. But we'll get to why this is relevant, because Muslims don't talk about this. But if you read the Hadith, they make it very clear that Gabriel is a giant of an angel, a massive angel. And then this conveniently gets forgotten in the modern telling. Gabriel, he gave me a squeeze. He squeezed me, doll.
May I add one thing very quickly? So if you ever find yourself where an angel is basically a giant and and one foot is in one horizon and the other one on the other one, don't look up.
Yeah, let's hope he's wearing underwear, okay? Okay. Emmanuel, you were saying?
Now I have to. You made me laugh, and it's difficult to make a German laugh. Where was I? Yeah, I just wanted to ask, a stupid question, as a stupid infidel. I'm a little confused. I mean, this was written hundreds of years after Muhammad died, right?
250 or so.
How would they know what Muhammad was thinking?
Allah works in mysterious ways. Yeah, but I just want to bring to your attention the fact that these Muslims focus on a given narrative today, which seems to have shrunk. But in yesterday's episode, we spoke about, or last week's episode, we spoke of narratives that Muslims told that were part of their culture, a normal part of their daily discussion and beliefs, that they've completely dropped today because they're embarrassing, because they have no evidence for it. So they've now shrunk the narrative or altered the narrative to exclude those, and now they're trying to be more Abrahamic or whatever the case might be. But these stories are all over in the Islamic sources, and now they're forgotten, now they're unnoticed, now they gloss over them, but they're there. And to me, it's curious. Why don't they brag about these anymore when they used to in the older books? Any comment from you, Paul, before I go on?
Yeah, the passage or the explanation for the passage, read in the name of thy Lord who created. This is Sean W. Anthony devotes a whole chapter to this in his book Muhammad and the Empires of Faith, and he points out that this is extraordinarily similar to a story that is told. It's in Bede and in his history of the English Church, where he talks about a monk called Caedmon, who's up in the northeast of England, and he has to compose a poem, and he's lacking inspiration, and then he does some meditation. He goes out onto the coast to do some meditating and praying, and then an angel appears to him and tells him the word of a song, and then he goes in and he goes back and presents this to the abbey. And this story, there are all sorts of parallels between the two. And this story appeared in Bede, which was being written. When was Bede's history of the English Church? It would have been before Ibn Ishaq, so it would be before this version was written down. And the two seem to come from the same source. It's not somebody didn't sit down and make this story from nothing. This is a version of a story that was already being told in relation to the actual text of the not the actual text of the Quran, but the story also has an awful lot in common with Book of Isaiah, doesn't it? Because there's a section in Isaiah where he says, "Read what shall I read?" And these words "ma ikra" are identical in the version, apart from the change of language, from the Ibn Ishaq version compared with the Book of Isaiah. So the story that you see of the angel appearing and giving Muhammad a big bear hug seems to be based loosely upon these earlier stories.
These themes. Yes. Now, but we're going to see more of this. So I'm kind of easing into this, but we'll see more and more of these similarities that will start to collect. And Muslims try to not draw attention to them. But my question was like, why is there so much of this stuff throughout all of the Islamic sources that back then was a big thing for them, but now they just kind of like, let's not talk about that, you know? So I am Gabriel.
Sorry, can I come back and just make another point? There's the story of Gabriel with his feet astride the horizon seems to be based upon two other surahs of the Quran. Surah 53, the star, and Surah 81. What's number 81?
Yeah, it's by the way, Brother Paul, it is Isaiah 29:11 and 12.
Thank you. 81, the rolling up, okay, the unfolding, I think I know it as, but these talk about your prophet is not mad or is not possessed. Surely he has seen him on the horizon, and it occurs to me that's I guess where you get the story. If you want to try and put the two stories together, if you've got Muhammad up meditating in his cave on the mountainside, the angel gives him a hug, and the next thing he's looking at him on the horizon. I guess you've got to have the angel suddenly grow and become a massive angel, because you're trying to put in, you've created a story for one verse.
Escalation.
To fit the wording of that. But then there's another two verses or two passages that doesn't fit that story you've just told. So somebody at Ibn Ishaq being creative, getting all this material, trying to reconcile it all, puts it all together and says, oh, well, Gabriel must have been a giant.
Well, the thing is that I want to get
to me, if I can just finish this point that I find very interesting, is that the person who told the original story about Gabriel hugging Muhammad probably didn't know about the other two surahs when he made up that story, because I don't think he would have made up that story if it had been in. Why would you tell a story about the angel Gabriel appearing and giving you a bit of a hug if there were and that's the first time you see him?
Yeah.
If there are other verses saying, oh, I'm not mad, I saw him over there, he's on the horizon, he's by the lote tree. You wouldn't have created the first story if you knew about the sort. So people were had lost the knowledge of what had really happened.
Yeah.
And we're trying to make up stories for individual surahs when they didn't have the whole picture. They didn't have the whole Quran in front of them. And that's, I think, a key idea
that's a brilliant point. You've got two different Gabriels, basically. One's a massive giant who's miles tall. But also, my question to myself was then, where do these come from? What's the original source here?
Yeah, but Muhammad Lloyd assured his Muslims that he met Jibril in two different ways. As a young-looking man like Dihya, some nice-looking dude, when he used to go to the market, all the women go there, even if they don't want to buy anything, just to look at his handsome face. And the other time, as huge as this huge angel with this unbelievable number of wings, and every wing goes as far as the east and the west. So Muhammad is not like contradicting himself. He said that he met Jibril in these two different conditions.
So, yeah, like he went to heaven on the horse, except his wife says no, he was asleep in bed. Yeah. But it was metaphoric. It was phorical or metaphorical. I don't know which one. It was either metaphorical or phorical. I don't know if that's it's one of those.
No, so, Lloyd, you don't get it. Objective physical reality doesn't exist. So if Muhammad thinks he can fly on a magic donkey, he can fly on a magic donkey.
Right. So, O Muhammad, thou art the apostle of Allah, and I am Gabriel, and I stood looking at him, and that turned me from my purpose, which was to go murder himself, right? Moving neither forward nor backward. Then I began to turn my face away from him, but toward whatever region of the sky I looked, I saw him as before, because Gabriel was so massive, he covered the whole sky. This is relevant. And notice, narrated Aisha, this is from a guy that was so unfriendly, people had to tell him to say hello, to greet. It's in English, we know it as say hi, Bukhari. So, right, whoever claimed the Prophet Muhammad saw his Lord is committing a great fault. For he only saw Gabriel in his genuine shape. in which he was created, covering the whole horizon. And that's in Sahih Bukhari. Right? We're taught Gabriel was a massive angel. I asked Aisha, what about his statement? Then Gabriel, approached and came closer and was at a distance of but 2 bow lengths. And she said it was the angel gibberish. He used to come to the prophet in the figure of a man, but on that occasion, he came in his actual and real figure and was so huge that he covered the whole horizon.
Yeah, but it is my question. You didn't answer my question I asked you first. When he come, this huge, massive angel, was he whispered to Muhammad or speak with a loud voice, which blew up his ears? Which one?
Look, we don't have the details. We have to assume it was telepathy.
Well, because his head had to be above the 7 heavens. And if he talked from the 7 heavens soft, I mean, Muhammad could not hear him. And if he talked loud, the whole world will hear him.
Look, it was a private conversation, okay?
Oh, private. Okay, I'm sorry. I apologize.
You know, this is making life very difficult, all these questions, right? So just
I'm trying to learn, brother. I'm here to learn. Please.
These are the wrong questions. If you ask the wrong questions, you're going to get the wrong answers, okay? So the book of Elchasai. So this is a companion to 2nd century Christian heretics and Gnostic revisions of Genesis stories and early Jesus traditions. This one is from Gerard P. Lutikesen, and this one is from Peter Loamanen and someone else, both Brill publications. And these talk about how Gnostics were revising Christian biblical stories, basically adapting them. Now, this is a story of a book that is revealed. The book of Elchasai is a book that was revealed. It was literally sent down from heaven. It was given. It's a man-sized book sent by an angel that's 100+ kilometers tall, but okay. It was given to a man by an angel from heaven. And it is taken from the story of Elchasai from Parthia in northern Iran. And Hadith writers who happen to live in the same area the angel came from. Isn't that just a coincidence? They borrowed many local myths. And the book of Elchasai, they have many names: Elchasaios, the Elchasai, the Elchaios, Elchai, Elchasites, Helkasites, there's several more in fact, is a lost prophetic text, a Jewish apocalypse. And this is where Odon would be so helpful right now. It was an apocalyptic text from Babylonia, dated from around 116 to 117 AD. In fact, some records of it, some discussions of it goes back to about the year maybe 96, 97. You can trace it as early as that, just after the book of John is like completed, right? And it's written during the reign of Emperor Trajan, 98 AD to 117. It contains law. It contains apocalyptic prophecies. Now we know that Muhammad was very apocalyptic, and that emphasis is also finished because Muslims, back then were like, yeah, within 100 years of you getting this message, the earth will come to an end, and it didn't. So yeah, okay, so let's move on. Mm-hmm. And had apocalyptic prophecies pertaining to Messianic, Jewish, which is Christian Jewish, pagan, and Gnostic doctrines. Any thoughts on this before I go on?
May I?
Go ahead.
Kalam, welcome. If you'd like to join us, please let me know, and I will send the link, and you can join us. You'd be welcome to come on anytime. Yeah, please go
on this particular region. I think Paul definitely knows more about this than I do. But if I remember correctly, the Abbasids, although they were pretty much spread out everywhere, but the revolt that ended up with the Abbasids gaining power started in that region that you showed before, like around Merv, like where everything pretty much started. And then when we have people like Al-Bukhari, is from Bukhara. So it's from that region. So Paul can probably correct me if I said those things and they are not right. But if that's correct, then it's from the Abbasids, and it seems to originate from this region, where you are saying that these things were happening. So it would make even more sense.
Yeah. Add to that, this is that the normative of the new thinking, the new ideologies, the new teachings that this book revealed came down from heaven, sent down
by an angel,
came down, the Quran was sent down.
Yeah. So part of my thinking here, right? This is my speculation, but hopefully it's based on some level of actual historical fact, is that Muslims had different stories in the past. And then as knowledge of the sources of where these stories came from was starting to come through academia and become public, they had to drop these stories and then adopt a different story. They had to shrink their whole narrative to get rid of and get away from these things, because it's embarrassing. Because it's like, yeah, this does sound like a story from, it's just, to me, it's just too coincidental.
Yeah, but notice here, Lloyd, from Moses' days to the last book in the Bible, nothing came down, nothing revealed down. It was men of God, inspired by the Holy Spirit, and they use their own vocabularies, their own words, their own style of writing, their own knowledge with the guidance of the Holy Spirit to write to us what God want to communicate with, what God want to tell us. But you get to the first century after Christ, and you see, oh, now these books coming down, revelation coming down. Why we do not have any revelation came down as Muhammad claimed about Moses and Jesus and all these new style of writing does not fit with the real biblical writings and the way how these people wrote to us all that which is written from Genesis to Revelation, but it fit with the new thinking of Islam, the Quran, and what else come up with Muhammad.
Yeah, but all of this, so this is now, I'm just gently putting these pieces on the board, but all of this seems to line up with Islam. Stories they've forgotten, things that, and it all fits in with the region, it fits in with the time, the history, and these parallels, these overlaps just start to mount. There'll be more and more and more and more. Paul, you're nodding your head there, and JC.
Yeah, and this idea. I mean, am I right in thinking that there's absolutely no precedent in Judaism and Christianity for the idea of God sending a book down? God inspires people, and different branches of Christianity can be more or less literal as to how they interpret Holy Scripture. But there's nobody says, "Oh, I've got a book from God." Most of the books in the Bible are specifically written as somebody's account. You're told. This is a book of Daniel, this is a book of Isaiah, and so on. No, there's no book of God in the Bible, is there?
Yeah, and this is very syncretic. Yeah, JC, you were going to say?
I was going to add that unless there are lots of Jewish legends about giants, and I haven't actually seen them, but the Islamic traditions, they seem to be a bit obsessed with giants. Adam was a giant. Now we've seen Jibril. Even I think the story about the camel of God is this camel that eats a lot and cannot squeeze through 2 mountains and all of those things. So I think they were a little bit obsessed with, size.
Yeah, but also
you got the giants in Genesis, don't you?
Yes.
Who inhabited and Joshua and Caleb and so on said they felt like grasshoppers beside them. So there were some giants there at one stage.
Right, but now the only model of a book given to someone that I could come up with was this, that I could find, rather, shall we say, is this. This is the only model, and then you're going to start to find that there are practices and ideas and concepts within this particular Gnostic sect, this Jewish Christian apocalyptic Gnostic sect, that overlaps so much with similarities in Islam. It starts to get scary.
I think just dealing with this one issue is very informative, very instructive, because most of the problems of Islam are not the problems that are caused by Muhammad or the Quran. It is the literalism, this belief that the Quran is the actual verbatim words of God. It's that belief that is leading so many people to do terrible things or believe ridiculous things, because they're incapable of reading it as it is, as a historical document from the 7th century, and to try and understand it within those lights. And I find it very interesting that this, as we pointed out, that this comes from the very place that the not the Quran, but the interpretation of the Quran comes from. And so that's fascinating.
Yeah.
The Quran itself does not ask to be treated as the actual words of God. And people think this is strange because so much of it is phrased as though it is God speaking. God does these, it says, say this, say that. And sometimes you have this little pantomime of, they ask thee concerning X, say Y. So a lot of it sounds as though it is phrased as though it's the verbatim words of God. But there's also lots of it that aren't. There are 14 surahs that don't contain any indication that it's the words of God. Something like the Surah 105, the elephant, or 106, the Quraysh, or 108, Kauta. None of these give any indication that that is supposedly written by God.
You're right.
And a lot of the time, it's manifestly not. So, for example, if it's quoting different prophets, and they're all saying the same thing. So Noah says this, and then Moses says this, and Abraham says this, and they all use exactly the same words. To me, it's absolutely obvious that it's not. It's not pretending to be real. It is poetry, or it's some sort of inspiring text, but it's not factual.
Right, Emmanuel, you want to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention it again so that people are aware of it. That this is the sect, the followers of Elchasai, is the sect that Mani grew up in. You know, Mani, the seal of the prophets, the final prophet. And you were asking, well, what religions other than Islam have this divine book sent from God? Well, obviously, Manichaeism has it, because it's basically the same. Because
Mani's father was an Elchasite, and Mani grew up for 20 years as an Elchasite.
Right, and of course, then you have all kinds of copycats of Manichaeism, including Islam. Of course not. And then you have a lot of copycats of Islam, like Mormons. The Book of Mormon.
Even the KKK.
That started out as a supposedly ordinary book as well, but then it got elevated, and it's divine, it's miraculous, and it changes its content, and I don't know, it's magic, and it's dictated from a hat, and it has magic stones, and no one can see it.
Let's try not to go off on like.
No. But the reason I mention Mormonism is because Joseph Smith also had witnesses, right? In order to boost his credibility, so that he could say, this is definitely a divine book that definitely exists, even though only I can see it, right? In order to boost his credibility about that, he had witnesses that testified, this is true. And it's the same with Elchasai. He also had witnesses that testified, this is definitely true.
Yeah. Well, we'll add more detail as we go. There's a bunch of slides. We don't have to try and fit it all into one episode. So the model that we have for an angel that's massive, that gives us a book, comes from this region, right? So now, which is very odd. It's known from early Christian writings. And thank you, Kalamel. Thank you very much for the super chat. Pity you can't join us. That would be very nice. But you're always welcome at any time. Laudate as well. The invitation is there if you'd like to jump in. So it is known from early Christian writings of Hippolytus of Rome, dated 235, Eusebius 340, and Epiphanius of Salamis, dated 403, and Origen 253. So this had legs. This lasted a long time. This particular set of ideas was widespread and persisted for centuries. Now, they mention it only in the context of heresy, and the Elchasites promised remission of sins to all those who listened to the reading of this book and believed in it. Epiphanius explains the origin of the name Elchasai or Elchasai to be Aramaic Hayil Kesai, meaning the hidden power, right? I mean, could this refer to a hidden imam? I don't know. That's just a thought. That's just speculation, sheer speculation there. But Hayil Kesai, meaning hidden power. Right, we'll get more to the word Kasai. Now, the book of Elchasai from Origen, he called them religious propagandists. Now, oddly enough, the word dawa means propaganda. Right, correctly defined, dawa is propaganda. Propaganda on behalf of the family of the prophet, or on behalf of the prophet of Islam. And it appears in the Christian churches in Palestine, and reported that the Elchasites made selective use of the Old Testament and the Gospels. They picked and they chose. Origen and Hippolytus tell us that they rejected the Apostle Paul entirely. Isn't that just sheer coincidence? And they claimed that their book had come down from heaven. And we also get that in Origen and Eusebius. And according to Origen, the Elchazites declared that in the case of emergency, you could outwardly deny your faith, provided that you only do so with the lips, but in heart you remain
that
true
is
in faith.
Quran. That is Quran. That is
Isn't
Islam.
this odd? Yes, go on.
425, I believe, if I remember the verse accurately, Allah, you can deny your faith with your heart as long as, with your mouth, as long as you believe in your heart and your heart is secure. That is Islamic. That's 100% Islamic. Lloyd, are you frozen or just me?
You're just back. You just came back, Osama.
We lost your voice, Lloyd. Oh, yeah, you're good now. You're good now.
Sorry, that was me then. Yeah, it looks like I went offline. Sorry about that. But yeah, so that's taqiyya. That's exactly as it is defined in the Quran. That's taqiyya. This practice, again, from the same group, the angel, the book, the massive angel, and now you've got taqiyya, and they rejected the Apostle Paul. Any thoughts, guys? I missed most of what you said, Osama. Anyone else?
That's it.
Well, does Osama want to repeat it, maybe?
JC, anything?
I am a little bit shocked, and I assume that people watching are as well thinking the same thing. Just like Usama reacted, like that is not only in Islam; it's actually in the Quran. This is intriguing.
Yep. So more now, Islam has a vendetta against Saint Paul. Okay, I did my show called Polemics, but maybe I should redo that one. It's actually fascinating. This garbage history they tell about Paul. And then Allah has sent down the book from heaven by an angel. And of course, what they fail to obviously say is a massive angel. Quran 16:106, one who is forced to renounce his religion while his heart is secure in faith.
Yeah. That's a verse.
Yeah, it's taqiyya. It's the definition of taqiyya, and it was practiced and was part of the teaching of this group.
Yeah.
So more overlaps mounting up. Paul, anything from you before I move on?
No, it's absolutely fascinating.
Yeah. Now, dispensation. This is from the Sharia, C6.2 from the Reliance. Dispensation is when what is normally forbidden is made permissible because of necessity or need. For example, if someone is forced to make a statement of unbelief, kufr, it is made permissible to ease his hardship for him to do so as long as faith remains firm in his heart, and that's defined in the Sharia.
Amazing, amazing. You know, can you imagine how many millions of Christians were slaughtered by the hands of the Muslim believers because simply they refused to deny Jesus? And Muslims can say anything and everything to take over a place or to survive or whatever.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. So, but now we need to go back. Remember, these are Messianic Jewish Christians, right? These are apocalyptic Messianic Christian Jews, Christianized Jews, right? But they're also mixed with Gnostics and paganism, right? And so we've got to look at now, where's the sources of all of these ideas of the massive angel? Where does that come from? So the angel of Elchasai and the Shur-Kama, it has been revealed by an angel whose height was 24 shoni, or 96 miles, and whose girth was 16 miles. From shoulder to shoulder, he was 24 miles. His footprints were 3.5 shoni long, which is 14 miles. And the breadth being 1.5 shonas, 4 miles. That's the width of his foot. With him was a female whose dimensions, he said, accorded with those mentioned. The male, he asserts, was the Son of God, and the female was called the Holy Spirit. That's Hippolytus in the Refutation of All Heresies.
Yep, that give you a good introduction to the Jibreel of Muhammad.
Right. In the Shur-Kama, now this is from a midrashic text of the Jews, right? Now, this is not, this heads towards the Kabbalah and all of that kind of stuff. But these are not necessarily, these are not canonical. Let's just say these are part of the writings of the Jews that you know, with their own fanciful writings that they got into. Some of the rabbis went overboard. But these ideas get absorbed into these other groups, and then you can see them make their way into Islam. They get watered down, but the Shur-Kama are the dimensions or the measurements of the body, right? This is a midrashic text that is part of the Hekhalot literature. It purports to record in anthropomorphic terms, in human terms, the secret names and precise measurements of God's corporeal limbs and parts. The majority of the text is recorded in the form of sayings or teachings that the angel Metatron revealed to the sage Rabbi Yishmael, who transmitted it to his students and his contemporary Rabbi Akiva. Now, the Tannaitic period was 10 to 220 AD, which falls within the period that we describe here. Right, so this is basically, I mean, people probably would think of this as, yeah, I mean, well,
can I ask? Is this Hekhalot literature? Is this from the Tannaitic period, or is it simply it's attributing this to Rabbi Yishmael, who lived in the Tannaitic period?
I think it's
this actual book from the 2nd century.
Well, the period is from the year 10 to roughly 220 AD, so it would fall within that period. So it's within that. I don't think I went in that deep, but I mean, this was from when I was researching this. You know, this was the conclusion that was drawn. So this goes, but this also goes back to the parts of the Bible that, shall we say, are less commonly addressed, like things like the book of Seth, the book of Enoch, right? Which are not considered canonical, let's say, within most traditions. But of course, it is within the Ethiopic tradition. But of course, we saw earlier when I mentioned 104 books were given to Enoch and Seth and Abraham and Adam and so on. Enoch and Seth got books. And for the Muslims, that was very important back then. But this whole importance of Enoch and Seth and all of these characters was important to these Jews who went off on these wild fantasies about, you know, and then also to various other groups, but not to Christians and not to, shall we say, more Orthodox Jews. But it was for the Muslims. I'm told it was embarrassing. Yes, Emmanuel.
And the Gnostics, as you know, I mean, you guys know it, but you know, I'm mentioning it for the audience. The Sephians are like the most important sect in Gnosticism. The secret book of John that you mentioned just now, that's from the Sephians. You know, so Seph is very important to the Gnostics. Metatron as well, also very important in New Age esotericism. They always talk about Metatron, and I just always thought Metatron was one of the enemies of Godzilla or something. I don't know.
Yeah. Just so by the way, James Diamond comes on. Guys, Christianity is also a mask of Gnosticism. Obviously, wake up. Look, how about you wake up, smell the coffee, and then maybe watch my series on Gnosticism. I've got several. The Gnostics actually come after Christianity is established because all of their claims are based on Christian texts. So they are late. They come after all of the Christian texts are written, and they borrow and then they corrupt and use all of those. And they are anti-Christian. And in fact, if you want to find Gnostics, you can look at modern atheists, you can look at the communists, you can look at the Nazis, because that's the fruit of Gnosticism at the end of the day. But we're not here to get into a long song and dance about that. Okay, moving on. Now, where do we get the giant Jesus from? So let's look to the 7th to 9th century. Therefore, having seen this, the soldiers woke up the centurions and elders, for they were also keeping watch. And while they were describing to them the things they had seen, behold, they saw 3 men coming out of the tomb with 2 young men. Hold on, he's like, idiot. He's got, you know, very, very smart. Gnosticism started with Zarathustra. Now, of course, this guy is, not the world's smartest. So you obviously are getting some of the world's least intelligent people in the chat, because on the internet, anyone can join, sadly. So, but moving on. They saw 3 men coming out of the tomb with 2 young men supporting the one, right? And a cross was following them. This is a walking, talking cross, okay? Sorry about that. And the head of the 2 reached unto heaven, but the one of whom they led out by the hand, his head reached beyond the heavens. So now think about this. We've got 2 angels leading the one, right? And their heads touched the heavens. And the one, Jesus, his head touched beyond the heavens. But notice these are massive angels who were in a cave. Who else do you know came out of a cave with revelation?
Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him.
Many beasts be upon him, I say.
Amen.
Yes, Emmanuel.
How does a 15-kilometer long angel fit in a cave?
150 kilometers.
We should rink and expand with the heat of the sun.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but notice in Islam, you've got the similar idea that you've got an angel in a cave. It gives a guy a book. And then outside the cave, the angel's 150 kilometers tall, which is insane. And here you've got, in the Gnostic stories, angels come out of a cave, but once they're out of the cave, they're 150 kilometers tall.
But Lloyd,
this concept is exactly what's in Islam, but it's only found here in these Gnostic stories.
Listen, boy. If you watch Aladdin, Alibaba, and the 40 thief, and the lamp, and the genie come out of it, the genie can expand and shrink in no time. It can be small and can be big, and it can be multiple ones. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, no. I mean, I did, I've done how many episodes on Gnosticism? I've done probably 20 episodes on Gnosticism. I mean, I went into such depth. I mean, Emmanuel, I mean, you come out of a Gnostic cult, and you went to my material to learn about it, right?
Yeah. Well, how shall I explain this that it makes sense to people? When you're in this kind of stuff, when you're in a cult, if that makes any sense, you don't realize you're in a cult, and if that makes any sense, it helped me a lot to reflect on some of the teachings from back then and realize, hey, this stuff was Gnostic, because it's not like Gnostics will never, it's not like they're like the Jehovah's Witnesses and they go door to door and say, hey, we're Gnostics. You want to join our heresy studies? It's not like that. They never admit to be Gnostics. They always say, oh, we're Christians, but we're the true original Christians, unlike the Catholic Church. They're the heresy, but they never admit outwardly that they're Gnostics. So it's only when you realize what Gnosticism truly is that you can understand that, hey, they're actually Gnostics, because they will not admit it.
And they've got no historical lineage as far back as they claim. But so we just finish, and then his head reached beyond the heavens, and they heard a voice from heaven asking, did you preach to those who sleep? And a response was heard from the cross saying, yes.
The cross spoke too.
Yes. Any thoughts from you, Paul and JC?
Well, it's absolutely fascinating. I actually missed the beginning. I must have been distracted. What document is this from? Is this from the
this
can't pronounce it. Like
in 1886, the Gospel of Peter was discovered by a French archaeologist named Urbain Bouillon in the modern Egyptian city of Akhmim, within 10 miles of Nag Hammadi.
Nag Hammadi. That's very close to where I live. Man.
No, it's it. But the coincidence with the story is remarkable. I agree.
It's the gospel of pizza. I never knew that there was a gospel of pizza in these days.
So, but you can see that these ideas, these elements, clearly, I'm not saying it's a one-to-one correlation, but clearly someone took an idea he saw and he said, hey, I can make a movie with that.
Yeah, build it up. You can add. You got enough material to start a new cult.
Yeah. And the Gospel of Peter is part of a book discovered in the grave of a Christian monk in Egypt in 1886. Now, when it says Christian, the thing is, obviously, I didn't go and dig into every last detail. But when they say Christian, I mean, maybe we've got to consider what value of Christian are we dealing with? Very low value or very high values?
Christian monk. We have plenty of monks in Egypt who know nothing about Christianity. So
was it a legit guy who just happened to have the book, or was it the not so legit guy? So the book found dates to the 7th to 9th century, but the text itself dates back at least to the early 2nd century, the same time as the book of Elchasai.
Yeah.
And So Arlette was saying she's not able to join right now, but she's listening, and she's glad that she left that cult. Yeah, but welcome. I mean, so yeah, Arlette, Kalam, if you guys want to join us next week, of course, anytime, let me know. Otherwise, if you see I'm online, just drop us a note in the chat, and of course we'll let you in. Yeah.
Notice that, Lloyd, that the Apostle Peter did not tell us anywhere that he wrote a gospel. And his 3 letters, he never mentioned anything about a written gospel. Nobody else mentioned in the Bible that there is another gospel.
Or walking, talking crosses.
Oh no! Well, the talking cross itself, that's a miracle. MashaAllah, MashaAllah. That almost led me to say the Shahada today, but I will wait. I'm forcing myself to wait. But seriously, why Mark did not tell us as Peter wrote in his own gospel? I mean, Mark is a disciple.
No, well, it's typical. Gnostics, of course, would always name a gospel after
somebody else.
I mean, think about it. I mean, if you wanted to form a cover band, you'd have the Whitney Houston cover band, or you'd have the, you wouldn't have the Jimmy from 11th Avenue cover band, because no one knows who the heck Jimmy was.
Sure.
You name yourself after someone famous. But
Amen.
Constantly, we're going to find these overlaps of concepts, of ideas that precede, and they all come from this region, which is geographically and historically. Eventually, you'll start to see the tie into Islam. Yes, Emmanuel?
I just want to quote Paul real fast, and this is one of the reasons why the Gnostics hate him. I'm astonished that you are so quickly deserting the one who called you to live in the grace of Christ and are turning to a different gospel, which is really no gospel at all. Evidently, some people are throwing you into confusion and are trying to pervert the gospel of Christ. But even if we or an angel from heaven should preach a gospel other than the one we preach to you, let them be under God's curse. As we have already said, so now I say again, if anybody is preaching to you a gospel other than what you accepted, let them be under God's curse.
Right.
Amen.
Yeah, JC, any thoughts from you? You're an author. I mean, you mix fact and fiction to make up new stories. I mean, what are your thoughts on this so far?
Yeah, it feels, well, first for people who are thinking like that guy that got abrogated earlier, like, oh yeah, well, Christianity is like, read the Bible. If you read the Bible and then you read this passage here, you see that there is something that doesn't fit. The New Testament doesn't sound like this at all. You can actually tell a heresy very quickly because that is insane. But also the whole thing about the cross speaking, it's incredibly bizarre. That you wouldn't expect to find anything like this in the New Testament. But when we go to Islam, they have the belief that on the Day of Judgment, the Quran will speak for you and the black stone will speak for you.
Yeah, the Quran will speak. You're right.
Yeah, so it's kind of bizarre that we would have this incredibly obvious weird stuff, and those sort of things appear then in Islam.
Yeah, the ideas clearly migrate with slight adaptations, but the ideas migrate. So, Usama, are you being convinced here, or am I just making up stories from random, bizarre, arbitrary, obscure texts?
Listen, I learned from Muhammad that everything can speak. The ant spoke, the hobo spoke, the tree spoke, the earth spoke, the rock spoke. So why not the cross? It is even more powerful that the cross can speak.
Yeah.
What's wrong with that?
Yeah. Paul, you look like you're gearing up for something there.
Oh no, I was just pointing out. I didn't never got right to the end of it, but the Gospel of Peter is included in the Apocryphal Gospels, which is translated and edited by Bart Ehrman. And is a fascinating thing everyone should have. And yes, I'm seeing it's all here, just as you say.
Great.
Just reading around it.
I was watching Bart Ehrman today, and the guy is starting to. You know what? The guy. I mean, he just needs to give up, because now he's not only. Anyway, let's just move on. The guy's argumentation is so clearly specious. It's just a joke. So whence the giant Jesus and his talking cross, the resurrection in the Gospel of Peter as prophetic fulfillment of LXX, that's the Septuagint, Psalm 18. That's published online by Cambridge University Press in 2017. 2017. Yeah. And notice the Gospel of Peter they speak of, and the giant Alexa, stop. Good grief. So the giant Jesus. So now, what if the Muslims said, you know what, Jesus was the one who came to Muhammad in the cave? What if this is kind of their idea? You know, it's just crazy that to me. So the conclusion is that the Elchasites had a Jewish Christian background, and they were based in Syria. They ended up settling in Syria. They came out of Iran, northern Iran, ended up in Syria. It is also an exegetical analysis of the Song of Songs, right? So it's Psalm 18 that's relevant to them, and Song of Songs 5:11 to 16 as the love between God and Israel. And Muslims love to go on about that, talking about
that is a very, very bad. I mean, do you believe this is come out in your Bible? This pornography? I can almost see pornography there.
Yeah. So, and they proclaim that anyone who studies it is guaranteed a portion in Olam Haba, the world to come. Okay, so you can see they've got lots of Jewish borrowings, right? Jewish apocalyptic, but they're stealing from the Bible, but also not just the Bible, from Jewish secondary texts like the Midrash, which is exactly what the Muslims are doing. A lot of their myths come out of the Midrash and the Talmud and all of the other sources, and these guys were doing exactly the same. So, you know, we covered that yesterday in our Jewish sort of borrowings episode. He alleges, as to those who have been involved in every description of lasciviousness and filthiness and in acts of wickedness, if only any of them is a believer, that he determines that such a one, on being converted and obeying the book and believing its contents, should by baptism receive remission of sins. So in other words, if you're a sexual pervert and you're a dirty little pig, right, and you are involved in acts of wickedness, if you just believe in the Quran or the book of Elchasai, and if you do the ablution, you will receive forgiveness of your sins.
The Bible is very clear. Without just shedding of blood, there is no forgiveness of sin, period.
But you see the overlap here between Elchasai and the Quran. Can you see the potential overlap here? I mean, does that make sense to you guys? Or am I drawing a false parallel here?
Oh, my world.
So, encouraged following the law, which included circumcision, they condemned sacrifices, they rejected eating meat, and they had pagan astrology. Now, that might explain, okay, these guys were vegans, and we know how religious those guys get. And they had pagan astrology, which would start to explain some of the monotheism stuff that we covered as well. Right? So that could be where they've taken borrowings. Paul, does any of this sort of jump out at you? Can you see where some of this may have filtered through and made its way into Islam? Are you starting to see little connections? There are other materials I haven't spoken of yet, but they also make their way into Islam.
Yes, but I think the Song of Songs is I've thought for a long time, the Song of Songs is very important. It describes, on the face of it, it describes the romantic love between two people, the Shulamite bride and Solomon. But it's clear from the language that is being used that it's not actually about two human beings. It's the lady represents the church, or actually not the church, of course, in those days. She represents the land of Israel. So it talks about her neck being like the Tower of David, and talks about her teeth being like the sheep going down to be washed in the river of Gilead, and so on. And it's clear that she represents Israel, and the man represents the temple. So he's got legs like pillars, like the cedars of Lebanon, and gold, and so on. So the man represents a temple. It's a love affair between God represented in the temple and the people of Israel. And later on, it becomes a metaphor for the church in New Testament times, or Christian times. And then and why, of course, this is all interesting is because at one point, quite a crucial point, the bride describes her lover as Muhammadim, which is the royal. It's a royal plural because in the text it's King Solomon, but it talks about it, and that is the name that is used to represent this personification of the temple. So it's always very interesting when the Song of Songs comes up, because it's to me is connected with how the Prophet of Islam found a name for himself.
Right. Yeah. We may not have the full mechanism, but it's just that we're finding sources that can link geographically and in terms of history, time, and place. Yes, Emmanuel.
Muslims love to use this, both as an example. That it just shows you how little Muslims know about the Bible, because they don't even realize when they contradict themselves, because you have some Muslims, and sometimes even the same Muslims. Sometimes you have the same Muslims making the argument that, the Bible is filthy because it includes a romantic poem. And then you have the same Muslims making the argument, this speaks of Muhammad, not even realizing that this is the same text that, just a few minutes earlier, they criticized for being pornographic or something.
Yeah.
But Paul, what I wanted to say is, I'm not disagreeing with you. I kind of agree with you. That said, I'm a bit skeptical about Solomon in general, because the occultists love him so much, right? So yeah.
I like quickly, Brother Lloyd. I love what the scripture said about forbidding eating some food. 1 Timothy 4:3. 1 Timothy 4:3. It go against the teaching which you just read for us.
Rejected eating meat. Yeah.
Same idea.
So there are other Gnostic groups, there are other heretical groups that also did this, and I've covered them in the past. But all of these things seem to be specifically on the point of denying or rejecting or going against the will of God, the laws of God. So you'll find that as well. Yeah, Emmanuel, quickly.
Just wanted to say that the Manichaeans also didn't eat meat, and also the sect I was in, we didn't eat meat either.
Okay, that's crazy stuff. Good grief. I'm from Africa, man. We eat meat, okay?
Yep. If it does not move, we eat it. Even if it did move, we can stop it and eat it.
Well, there you go. So the Ebionites equal Nazarenes equal Elchasites. I wish Odin was here. That would be, I don't know where the heck. He hadn't seen my messages. I sent out the notification this morning. So one of those fragments, number 9, contains a cryptogram which, reading outwards from the middle word and inverting the order of the letters, produces an Aramaic formula. Such a play upon words presupposes readers who understood Aramaic. Odin's got a thing for Aramaic as well. And it makes it probable that the book in its original form was written in Aramaic. So notice there's some kind of encoding that was going on. They had an encoding method, so it was written in a secret sort of code, right? Mm-hmm. It is not possible to decide whether Elchasai was his own name or a nickname. For example, Simon Magus. Like, we know Simon the Mage, that wasn't his name, but we know that you got called the Magus, right?
Yeah.
It was disseminated among other religious groups, Jewish and Jewish Christian, the Jewish Nazarenes or the Judeo-Christian Ebionites. And for this, Epiphanius, once again, it gives us the evidence. The influence of the Elchasites upon Mani, as we now know from the Cologne Mani Codex, must have been considerable. Down to his 24th year, Mani lived in an Elchasite community, and his own independent teaching developed in controversy with this baptizing group. So these people had a baptizing practice, but they would do it several times a day. Daily baptizing practice. But it wasn't necessarily full immersion. It was maybe like ablution. Because there was
I imagine it as being similar to the what you do as a Muslim, right? You clean yourself before you do the prayer, right?
Yep.
And also that was taken from the Jewish culture. We have
the mikvah, the mikvah, and you do that, you cleanse yourself before. Yeah. Like in a Catholic church, you have the water as you go into the church. There's a little bit of a water thing, and you can take your fingers and then use the holy water to, as a blessing. So you have the Jewish mikvah, and you've got these guys. So yeah, the whole idea of, but these guys were eventually the baptizers became ablutionists, which ties into Islamic practice. Paul, you're nodding your head there, I think.
No, I was going to say the same thing. There's got this recurring theme. I think the Catholics get away with it quite lightly. It's just dipping your fingers in and making the sign of the cross. But yes, both Judaism and Islam put a great store.
Yeah, and it was a very strong practice in Judaism. If you look under the Dome of the Rock, for instance, there was about 50 years ago or more, there was a major earthquake, and a couple of archaeologists got a chance to photograph and actually survey what was under the Dome of the Rock, and they discovered the Byzantine church. But underneath the Byzantine church, they found Jewish synagogue, which was clearly there long before the supposed Muslim,
I think that's it, the Al-Aqsa Mosque.
Yeah, and they found.
I'm not sure it was a dome. It was the one off to the side, I think.
And they found numerous of these mikvahs, these ceremonial baths. They found numerous of these. So the Book of Elchasai and Alcibiades. So the fragments, let me just double check. Yeah. Okay. So the fragments consist of a detailed description of the limbs of God in the figure of a man. So, and this apparently deliberate and excessive indulgence in anthropomorphism proved shocking to later and more rationalistic Jewish thought. On the other hand, the Kabbalists held it as a profound symbolic expression of their own purely spiritual world. So that's an early sort of Gnostic leaning there. Everything is spiritual, matter doesn't matter, right? But notice here you've got the one group that's talking about describing God in critical detail, whereas the Muslims come and they muddy the waters and like, no, it's not possible to know what God is like. Here they're refuting the Jews who have these ideas, right, in the Shirkama about the measurements of God and what God looks like. And then you have the Muslims come along later like, no, we're against that. We are. So now there's a conflict. And you said Mani went in conflict with the Elchasites, as we saw above. Mani went into, right, he developed his own teachings in controversy with the baptizing group. So now that might be an explanation for why Allah is such a genetic weirdo, but because they're trying not to measure him. They're trying not to make him finite. They're trying to do the opposite, make him unknowable. Does that kind of make sense?
Mm-hmm. I think some Muslims take a very literal view of the Quran, and they say that God does have a body, don't they?
Yep.
Do the Wahhabis not say this? That they say, well, it says in the Quran that he's got an eye, so he must have an eye, and it says he has a hand, so he must have a hand. I think he's got two right hands, doesn't he?
Yeah, but then the two right hands could also be
his shin, so he must have one shin.
But then also the two right hands could be a reference to the Trinity, because God has two righteous partners, two righteous assistants. The right hand is also a symbol of righteousness, of correctness, of so Jesus and the Holy Spirit. So there's also that potential.
Right hand is a hand of power. It is a hand of strength. It is a mark of strength. Yeah.
Yes, but having two right hands isn't a sign of strength, because then you can't hold anything.
Yeah, but is it two right hands,
the whole thing,
or is it the right hand as in the sense of I sat at the right hand of the Father, meaning I was elevated like the Father. He's got two elevated beings or persons with him. So there's that. I know
two right hands, you wouldn't be as efficient as if you had a right and a left hand.
Yeah, but it's either going to be you can hug. You've either got a mutant, or they're taking a concept and they anthropomorphizing it. Yeah, JC.
And I'm just thinking that now thinking about how the Quran describes or how Islam thinks that Allah speaks. If we look at the Bible and how God speaks, and then we compare with how in Islam they say that God speaks, there are two very different characters. But that is obvious at this point, of course. You know what I mean?
So what in particular, JC?
That in the Old Testament, we have God speaking, as in really having a conversation with someone. But when we look at the Quran, Allah is speaking in the first person, singular, also in the plural. He's changing like from singular to plural, like all the time. And he keeps saying words about himself in a very odd manner. If, you take the narrative as the Quran is supposed to be the words of Allah, which of course we are debunking entirely. But it just doesn't sound like the same structure. If you wanted to say this is the same God, you would take things from before and then make things sounding kind of like the same. Here it looks like they copied some other God. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
No, absolutely. You're absolutely clear now. Yes, this, and of course, in the Quran, he rhymes. The end of the lines all rhyme with each other. So God speaks in rhyme, which is not like the Bible. I don't think God rhymes in the Bible. He's not a poet, is he?
Yeah. So they go on, the measurements may have contained numerical symbolism, 19, which cannot be reconstructed. So the height of the Creator is given as 236,000 parasangs, based on a numerological interpretation of Psalm 147.5, as the height of our Lord is 236. The details transcendent possibility of visualization and cannot have been intended to indicate any concrete measurements. So now these Kabbalists sort of are misusing the Bible for their own purposes. He obviously has overdrawn anthropomorphisms in the preserved fragments are explicitly defined as describing not the substance of God, but his hidden glory, or the body of the Shekinah, the Guf HaShekinah. In the second half of the 2nd century, a Hellenized version of this speculation is found in the Gnostic Marcos's description of the body of truth. A number of the Gnostic gems, like the Hebrew fragments of the Shur Kamah, bear the figure of a man whose limbs are inscribed with magical combinations of letters corresponding to their secret names. And a clear reference to this doctrine is found as early as the Slavonic Book of Enoch. I have seen the measure of the height of the Lord, without dimension and without shape, which has no end. So now you've gone from a very specific description of God to a very Quranic. We don't know. God has no dimension. God has no shape. God is no end, which is very interesting from the Slavonic Book of Enoch. And you can apply that concept to the way that Muslims think about Allah. Yes, Emmanuel?
I just want to explain for the viewers. In Gnosticism, they believe basically in an ultimate source God, which they consider good, which they oftentimes identify with the morning star, with Lucifer, but ultimately also with themselves. We supposedly have his divine spark, blah, blah, blah. But that ultimate source God is not personified. It's not material. It transcends anything material. Whereas they also believe in a material God, in a personified God. But that is their demiurge, that is basically their devil, that
evil
is
God.
the evil God that they usually associate with Jehovah. They believe in Jehovah, they believe he created the world, but they believe he's evil because they believe he created the physical world. They hate the physical world. They hate the physical God. So their God, their true God, their good God is beyond anything physical, beyond anything that can be personified.
Right. It should be noted that even in, like the Gnostics, remember in the Sharia at the least, it states that the Muslims are the real Gnostics, the true Gnostics. And they also state in the Sharia, this world and what is in it are accursed, just like the Gnostics believe, which is a very odd claim for them to make. So we'll start to wind down here. I'll speak of the next section, Alcibiades to the Sabians. So he was one of the teachers, of course, of Elchasai. And Hippolytus focuses on the teachings and activities of Alcibiades from Apamea or Apamea in Syria. And he's like a guy called John the Solitary. We'll get to John the Solitary in a minute. But this is from this area. This is what's left. These are remnants of that period in Syria. And written around the Parthian War of 114 to 117, which is in the exact period that we spoke of earlier, in Aramaic, the language matches by a Mesopotamian Jew. The purposes may have been to bring comfort to Jews surviving the massacre during the war. Hence, you've got this whole end times vibe, which is what the Muslims were also very much into in the past, right? The apocalyptic view. It describes angelic beings of stupendous size and their announcement of universal destruction, because Muhammad was very much apocalyptic. The world will end. No one will be alive within 100 years of me having spoken this message. These beings revealed the requirements which would allow absolution on Judgment Day. Similar enormous angels are also described in 3 Enoch, like Metatron. But Elchasai is particularly describing Christ and the Holy Spirit. So now you go from Metatron to Christ and the Holy Spirit, and it's taken from 3 Enoch, and now these things start to blend. Osama, any thoughts? You're nodding your head there?
No, all this just bunch brand new information for me. I'm learning as I go.
Now, Hippolytus refuted Alcibiades' claims that the book was a secret writing or an apocrypha. He points out a Jewish Christian element. Alcibiades believes that Christians must be circumcised and follow the Mosaic law. So he's a Judaizer.
Yeah.
Now you're looking at a Judaizer as well, right? And Alcibiades stated that
It's right now, when you talk about 217, that's literally 140 years after Paul. This was settled in Jerusalem meeting between Paul and James and Peter, that we don't need to do that anymore.
Yeah, but we know that this particular religious idea persisted for centuries. So Alcibiades stated that a certain righteous man called Elchasai had received a book in conjunction with an angel in the town of Serai. Epiphanius, he, the author of the book, was of Jewish origin, and his ideas were Jewish. An unknown Elchasite missionary was present in Palestinian Caesarea in 247 AD.
And don't forget, this was coming after Revelation 22. As we look at the last paragraph, no one can add to the book of prophecy, or take away from it. And now you got another 100 some years later, he received a book.
Yep. And similar enormous angels are also described in 3 Enoch, like Metatron. Okay, but Elchasai is speaking of Christ and the Holy Spirit. Hippolytus states that the baptism for the remission of sins was inspired by a dogma of Bishop Callistus, and so suggests that this baptism was not part of the book's message, but introduced in Rome by Alcibiades and his group. So now we've got evidence of them borrowing religious practices elsewhere and then adding that to their particular religious dogma, just like what the Muslims may well have done, because they're borrowing it because they're trying to appeal to everyone. They're trying to take what they think is the best, right? Any thoughts from anyone before I finish off? Now, Elchasai is then said to have transmitted the book to the Sobiai, the Sabians. Now, I spoke originally about the Sabians, who were located in northern Syria, Turkey border, and also Muhammad was a Sabi, Muhammad was a Sabian, and also some of the first Muslims who converted, who joined the religion, said, we have become Sabians. So the Sabians were influenced by Elchasai.
So now I see connection between Sabians and the early heretics of the Christian Jewish beliefs.
Yeah. So now this ties back to what I did originally with Muhammad is a Sabi, he's a Sabian. And the Sabians, I spoke about the Sabians, had practices which are 95% identical to what Muslims practice today. Like I opened with that the Sabians had religious practices and beliefs that are almost identical to what Muslims practice today.
That's why Muhammad praised them in the Quran. Quran 262, I believe.
The people of the book.
Yeah.
Which book? The book of Elchasai.
Yeah.
Paul, your thoughts there? I'll go around from everyone.
No, absolutely fascinating. I think the people of the book is a slight mistranslation. Kitab means writing, doesn't it? It's a verb to write. So it would really be the people of Scripture. So the
Kitab is technically a bound
what's the
volume.
difference?
People of the bound volume, I think.
I think writing is a different term to a bound volume. Bound volume would be a physical object,
not a physical book, but
whereas the writing seems to reflect the content.
So I think it's originally an Ethiopic term that was borrowed into Islam.
So,
but you see how all these earlier threads that all these little pieces I was putting together on the table, now they all seem to start joining each other.
Yeah. I think depend where the original word came from, you cannot come up to the true understanding to any word in the Quran. I assumed it for many years that the Quran is Arabic, and that's how I thought, well, that is Arabic word. When I dig into it, well, it's not an Arabic word. Well, it's actually a Syriac word. It is Greek. It's Hebrew. It is Latin. It's like, wait a minute. And then when you get to the real meaning of the words, oh, now it makes sense. So depend. Did he say kitaba or kitab? In the Arabic language, kitab means book. Kitaba is a writing of the book. So I do not know what is the real source of that word in the Quran, which is mentioned all over the Quran.
Let me just try and find the word kitab here. Why did it open here?
In the Quran, it's plenty.
Let me try and find this.
Al-Kitab mentioned the Quran 162 times. Start with Quran 2:2.
Just find the word here, kitab.
Kitab. If you look it up in here's my book. I'll tell you what language this comes from.
JC, any thoughts from you so far? Okay, didn't find it. So yeah.
No, it is here. It is here. Listen, brother. The word kitab, book, is non-Arabic word of Aramaic origin. It's Aramaic, not Ethiopian. Aramaic.
I think my point. You might think it's a rather narrow one. It's not. It doesn't help us very much. But the word book might mean, for example, if you say Charles Dickens wrote lots of books, and you could say, oh well, I own lots of books. But using the word book in a different way. The book, the first instance, the book would be the text that's been written down, and in the second, it is a physical object you might happen to possess. And when you say the al-Kitab, I think it just means that
you may be right, brother Paul, because at the time of Quran chapter 2, when Muhammad said this is the book, there was no book, literally, unless, as Adam Seeker said, the book here is actually the Old Testament and the New Testament. He's pointing to the Bible, which was a script or a material in a written paper in Muhammad days.
But I'd be fairly confident that when the Quran says people of Scripture, it's referring certainly to Jews and Christians, and maybe other people as well, but it's talking about people who follow the what the Quran would regard as Scripture, the Psalms as well.
But I'm just wondering, is kitab plural or singular?
Has a kitab singular.
Singular. Okay, so see, this is weird, right? Because if you go by what Muslims usually believe, they believe the Torah is one book, the Injil is one book, the Tabua is another book. These are all separate books, right? But they all belong to the people of the book. So it should actually not be people of the book, but people of the books, because Muslims all think of these as separate books.
Yeah.
Right.
All right. God is good. God is good.
So guys, we'll look up the word kitab. I'll do some. I've got some notes on that somewhere, but yeah. So does all this start to make sense now? I know it's not definitive, but I'm trying to say, look at all of these threads. Let's look at all these odd things, and now they all start to merge, and it all starts to point towards Islam. All of these things have overlap, and now we've got a clear line from one to the other with many shared concepts that go back to the late 1st, early 2nd century already.
Yeah, may I? There is this line. I think it was from Albert Einstein. It was creativity in nature doesn't exist. True creativity is the art to conceal its source. And when reading the Quran and stuff, it looks like that. Someone didn't just appear in the Hijaz and say, "Hey, I'm going to create something new." Like everything is copied from other places. And if it was, for example, written by the Jews, the Quran and the traditions of Islam, they would be like 100% like ancient Judaism or something like that. But it's not. They have all of these different aspects. They must have come from somewhere. Someone cannot just go and invent them. So all of these things, huge angels, like you said, who would come up with something like this? It was not an original idea. There must have been a source where they had that idea, and then they reinterpret it and they put it with their traditions. So doing all of these things that don't seem to come directly from the Judeo-Christian traditions, they must come from someplace, and you're actually bringing all of these pieces. So I think it is really good, and lots of them, I mean, the region also makes sense that they were familiar with these writings, and then similar traditions, even things on Sharia, they are tested in those cultures. So yeah, keep going. Well done.
Yeah, I think that's perfect. I think that's exactly right. Well done, Jesse.
Great. Yeah. So pity Odin wasn't here, because I know Odin is very much into his Aramaic, and he's Judeo-Nazarene, the apocalyptic group. So yeah, I'm not sure what happened there, but hopefully this all made sense at least. Obviously, it's new information. It's trying to synthesize information that's not typically discussed. But these are things that are extant within the Islamic literature, things that used to be relevant, as we covered last week, that was relevant a century and a half ago, but now they've quietly kind of like, just let's not talk about that anymore. But now once you go to it, you go like, hold on, but this gives us a much clearer view of where Islam came from, because we can trace the sources of these ideas, right? Whereas they're trying to now glom onto ideas that they're trying to say, no, that comes from the Bible. Or they try to obscure the sources. But now when you go to these things that they used to find think about it, a century and a half ago, they had no problem with Muhammad and Aisha being a little girl, right? They were very proud of that, because Muhammad, was able to, I remember when I was a kid, they would say, no, Muhammad would, because he had a young girl, he could shape her and form her and train her in the right way and teach her. Now they're embarrassed because people have started to look the stuff up. Now the apologetics come after the fact. These are defensive apologetics after the fact. Before, they didn't hide it. So just like they no longer talk about these aspects of Islam, before they were very proud of it. But then, of course, through education, people go, oh, hold on, but that comes from the Jews, from the Kabbalah, that comes from here, that comes from this Gnostic group. Hold on, that's not original. That comes straight out of heresy. And so they think they kind of just casually, let's forget all that. Let's focus on these things that, and that's my thinking. Does that make sense to you guys?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, actually,
go ahead.
Yeah, a couple of quick points on that. One is we see that with the whole Masjid al-Aqsa, that's for 1400 years, it's been in Jerusalem, no problem. And now in the 21st century, we're having more and more Muslims going, no, it's not Jerusalem. It was a place between Mecca and Taif, because they realized that now everybody knows that the Masjid al-Aqsa was not built until 80 years after Muhammad. So they are trying to rewrite the history of Masjid al-Aqsa, but we have the tafsirs and all of those things. And the second point is, so last week when you showed these 104 books that they acknowledge as from the Abrahamic faith, it's curious that they acknowledge there were all of these books in the Abrahamic faith, but everything that made it into the Quran has nothing to do with any of those books, and not with the Injil, not the Torah. It's like they said these were from the Abrahamic faith, but let me tell you, the Christian legends and Jewish legends, it's incredibly bizarre.
Yeah.
How shall I explain this? My impression is that, well, it's evolving, right? It's not at all the way Muslims portray it, that Islam never changed, it was always the truth. It's precisely not like that. They are not limited to the truth. They can adapt. So whenever there is a
they
shift
see it in Darura. I mean, yeah, they're allowed to. They're allowed to. Oh, by the way, I just want to mention one thing before. Sorry, this is a side note. The 7 readings of the Quran. Okay, if you go to the first 7 Qira'at, we have Nafi, Ibn Kathir. Okay, and notice you also happen to have Elchasai as a reading of the Quran from Kufa.
I never knew that. Wait, is that the same? Why would there be a reading? What?
Yes.
Is that Prophet Elchasai?
So hey, I don't want to look, man, but notice now.
Where does that come from? I mean, obviously that has to be Elchasai the Prophet, right? Why would he have a Quranic reading?
It's one of the primary readings. One of the 7 Qira'at of the Quran is Elchasai. And Elchasai.
Is that finally? Have you found the lost book of Elchasai? Is that it? Is that one of the readings?
I need to investigate this. I need to look at this material in the Arabic language. Make sure it is accurate.
Usama, you can call me, man, and we shall do research. We'll get JC on the line, and
all right.
This is revolutionary. We found the lost book of Elchasai. We found it. The Muslims preserved it for us.
Well, we'll have to wait and see. Let's talk about it next time, okay?
Radio. So yeah, at least you guys are like going, yeah, that's interesting, as opposed to going, Lloyd, come on, that's just nonsense. Go back to sleep. I mean, at least I've got a bunch of guys who are going, you know what, this starts to make a weird kind of sense. So that's great to know. I mean, I did this 5 years ago, and I've never presented it on my channel.
Yes.
All right.
It's very good. My general approach to the Quran, or the kind of the conclusion that I've reached so far, is that the Quran existed, at least in some form, maybe not in quite the form we have now, but it was largely to do with what the early 7th century, the traditional lifespan of Muhammad, and then it was lost, and not the loss. Bull wasn't lost, but the people came to an end. And from a very early stage, nobody knew what on earth it meant. That's it. All these stories, a lot of the time, they don't really connect with the text of the Quran at all. And my conclusion is that all the early Muslims didn't last very long. That maybe Umar or somebody got rid of them, and there were no, and they were left with the book, but we had no idea what any of it meant. And so, from the very early stages, Islam's been trying to invent stories or create stories or borrow stories to try and explain what this book actually means. So some of these would have come out of Arabia, probably, but when the people, Ibn Ishaq and so on, Ibn Hashim, when they all had to try and make sense of it and try and put it together and make a story out of it, you're right, they were all up in Persia. So they would have drawn on Persian ideas as well as standard Jewish and Christian,
which we know is present in the Hadiths. We see it there. I didn't go into a long depth on that, but the Hadith reflects that culture to a large degree. So yeah, and it obviously would trickle into the rest of it. So yeah, so that's my thesis as I'm presenting it. These are just the facts. I mean, the conclusions we draw, well, fine, but that's up to everyone else. But I'm starting to think there is a lot more to the Quran. We've been boxed into the standard narrative, and sure, Jay blew the doors off the whole thing, and we're now looking at the stuff in a whole different way. As we can thank Dan Gibson as well for giving us a whole new perspective, Jay and Dan. I think there's more to this story, and yeah. So,
I was just thinking, before you mentioned Jay, I said I should give Jay a call and tell him we need to talk. I mean, literally, I'd love to bring him in here with us for a couple hours, and we can share our thoughts with his thoughts, and you see some serious connections there. I believe so. So maybe when he come back to the state, Lord's willing, we can have him on a show for a couple hours or so.
Great to hear it. Yeah. So guys, so for the audience, thank you very much for your time, your attention, for joining us. And it's always a pleasure to get your feedback, get your questions. Please share this. Please like the material, share it, spread it, talk about it. I mean, these are things that are present within Islamic literature, but it's not discussed. These were things they did discuss. They were very proud of this 150 years ago, and now it's like, don't talk about it because it's embarrassing. Yep. I think we need to go back and say, what was this? Is Islam what we know as we know it today the same as it was 100 years ago? Probably not. The same as 150? Probably not. So yeah, we need to talk about these things.
It's a cult, and cult are famous of changing their beliefs, their narratives, their story. All right. God bless you all.
Thank you very much. Really been excellent, guys. Thank you. So everyone, good night. God bless. See you soon.